Thank you all very much for coming to the Central Coast Sustainability Showcase. I mean, we're into our, seventh talk now, I think? And, well, I don't have a very good head for memories. Our seventh talk. So we've had, so far, 7 businesses that have got amazing contributions that they can make to not only the coast through employment, through developing ideas, giving somewhere for our kids to go to work, but world-scale ideas. You know, it's totally awesome what is being done on the coast. Our next speaker works sort of from the other end, because without finance, none of these ideas get out of the ground. And it's an essential component. It's not a grubby component, it is just an essential component. A mentor of mine once described money as fuel. It's like fuel for an aircraft. If you've got plenty of fuel, you can fly high and fast. If you've got hardly any fuel, you've got to fly low and slow. And so Paul has come at this as an individual. Paul's been very lucky in business, which takes a lot of hard work.
Depending
I think everyone would agree.
When you're looking at it at the moment.
Yeah. So Paul's been lucky in business and has been able to operate as an angel investor. So he likes new technologies and seeing where they can fit into the market. But rather than me telling you what Paul does, Paul, if you want to go with what
Thank
you
you.
do.
I might point out that I was originally coming here to talk about geopolymer concrete technology with a professor from Western Sydney University, but the university's run out of funding, so his job is in jeopardy, so he can't talk at the moment because, anyway, that's a different story. So yeah, look, so Bruce asked me to more talk about things that I got involved with over my career and what I've done before. And I have done a reasonable amount of investing in businesses, not huge amounts of money, but finding opportunities, talking to people trying to raise money or they've got ideas and trying to help them get their ideas off the ground or put them in touch with people that can help them get their ideas off the ground. But one of the key things that I always try and do is keep Australian intellectual property in Australia. And in my experience, too much Australian IP goes overseas to China, the US, Europe. And it's even more important now with COVID and what's happening globally that we keep it here and start developing our own IP and sell it overseas, not give it away and buy it back later on. So look, just a quick thing. Oh, actually, Bruce, could you go and grab that box? Oh, sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I forgot to get my little container for you to show you.
I'll tell you a joke, but I can't remember how to turn the microphone on. So when I first saw this polymer technology, it is quite amazing. It actually replaces cement in it, and it's very low energy intensive to manufacture. And the density, the strength testing they did in the original, just simple pressed bricks without putting tons of pressure on it, they were getting 40 MPa worth of compression loading on these. And anyone in the construction sector, 40 MPa, that's your high strength concrete they use in multi-storey buildings. And this was just pressed dirt. So anyway, back to Paul.
So look, basically I'm an electrical engineer, did that, and as an undergraduate, then I got involved in international business. When I first left uni, I was lucky enough to work with a startup. And that startup was a company called Tytel. And I actually designed this telephone with help from some of the other engineers there. And we sold 20,000 of these in Australia. We took on, it was Telecom Australia at the time. They controlled the regulations and they controlled the approvals. And we went to them and said, we want to design a telephone. They said, okay, here's what you have to do. We spent $1 million designing it, produced the initial quantities, and then they said, it doesn't meet the approvals. And we go, why? Well, we've changed the approvals. Because they were planning to block competitors. So Chris sued Telecom Australia. It ended up in every paper in Australia, double page spread, and the phone never stopped ringing. We hate Telecom Australia, we want to buy from you. So we sold 20,000 of these, and then what we were developing was and I'll talk about it in a sec, was a special technology. But that's where I started my career. And so I just started in the startup space, like a lot of other people in Australia. So this particular company was part of the Tyree family, which is a well-known electronics company in Australia. And they were developing an IP telephone effectively. Back in the early 80s, they started this. It was 10 years ahead of anything else in the world. And so that was my sort of introduction into startups and technology. Then I moved to Europe and backpacked around the world, and on on the back of a bus in Turkey, I came up with this idea of going online and starting a holiday accommodation website. So I thought of this idea of going online, and we formed a company called Take a Break. We became the second largest in Australia. We went from one house at Southwest Rocks, which we actually called Take a Break, and I had to change the name, which is now called Grass Trees Escape. And we put that online, and then we thought, well, this could be a global business. You know, you could buy ads on Google for 5 cents in those days. And Google did a case study on us. So we were one of the early adopters of Google before they went public. And we sold that business to Fairfax. But the main point of this slide is the 8 years of hard work. So it's more people that do startups work their asses off for a very long time. In our case, you know, I was working full time, I was working weekends, late nights, we had kids, we had mortgages, caused a divorce in the end, you know, all this sort of stuff you go through in the startup space. So it's not easy, and you've got to be persistent to get to the end of the road. A bit like what Bruce is trying to do here. Like, you know, you start off making timber products out of recycled materials, the glue doesn't quite work, then it works, you fix it, you adjust it, and then in the end you have a product and you have a business that you can run. You know, the last presentation they've been going, would you say 13 or 14 years, was it? Yeah. So it's a lot harder than most people think, and you've got to put the effort in. And we won lots of awards. We were in the tourism awards. We won Australia. We were nominated Australian Tourism Awards, but it was a lot of hard work. So in terms of investing in startups, it's really about trying to find that golden egg. And the key thing that I always look at when I first meet somebody, they talk about a product, it's really, why would you buy this product? Like, what are they going to solve that somebody hasn't already solved? Is it going to be better, faster, cheaper, safer, greener? You know, what is it, and why would somebody buy it? And I've seen lots of things where people say, oh, I've got this great idea and it does this, this and this, and we've already done this, and I think, I can't see why somebody's going to go out and buy that particular product. So if you're looking in this space, you really need to think personally about, well, what's the market advantage? What does it solve? What's the problem it fixes? And why would somebody go out and do that? And why does the company need funding? So there's a lot of people that be in the startup space that have come from the corporate world, and they're earning $120,000 a year, so they want to do a startup and they want to earn $120,000 a year. It doesn't work like that. So are you funding their salary, or are they actually legitimately starting up? And it's also a mindset thing. Some people, if you start with a corporate attitude and you're doing a startup, you're never going to be successful. You've got to change your thinking, you've got to look at it differently, you've got to run on the smell of an oily rag generally at the start. When you start getting funding and a bit of success and build some IP and stuff, you can change that slightly, but you've got to think like this when you're doing a startup. Some of the things also that I've learned over the years is what funds are they actually putting up? So you get a lot of these people starting new companies and they'll say, oh, look, we're raising money, and our business is worth $1 million. I've had that so many times. And you go, well, why is it worth $1 million? Where's your product? Oh, we've got this idea. They haven't produced anything. It's just an idea, which is 5%, if that, of what you're trying to do. And also, what funds are they putting up? Like, what are you actually doing? Are you wanting somebody, half a dozen of us, to fund the business, and you've just got this one idea, and then they want to keep 60, 70, 80% of the business? It's a red flag straight away. And their valuation, you know, what do they think the business is worth, as I sort of just said. And is there revenue? Are they actually making money already? If they're making money already, that's a hell of a lot better than not making money. And how are they going to support themselves over the next few years? Because this is a long-term commitment. As I said, we took 8 years to go from concept to getting out of the business. What's the market barriers? So who are they competing against? Are you in the waste product industry doing something that's going to upset the waste product players, which is some believe are connected to certain organised crime type people? So you're going to upset that type of people. There's lots of players in a lot of markets that you can cause a lot of problems to. And also the IP. So what is the IP? So you've got to be able to protect what you've got. Now, a lot of people will go down the patent route and say you've got to patent your idea. There's one key problem with patents in that besides the initial 18 months when you apply for one, once the patent's given, you actually have to give the information about your product to the patent authorities, and other people can actually look at that and to a certain extent copy some of your ideas. So there's always a play. Do you want to play a copyright model, or do you want to go a patent model? Patents are quite expensive now, you know, globally, cost you millions of dollars, and you've got to pay for them every few years. So they are expensive. There's other people that have created some copyright idea models for registering IP. Sometimes that works better. And what's your exit strategy? So if you're going to put your money in, how are you going to get it back? Or how's the company going to sell? You know, and can you work with the people? Bruce and I have got a lot of experience in that. Crazy people that want ridiculous money and impossible to work with. Also doing the deal. So if you're going to actually invest in something, make sure you've got a good lawyer and a good accountant, you know, that can help look through the contracts, draw them up, so spend the money. If they haven't got much money, you're in a good negotiating position if you're going in with a group of you to get some reasonable equity in the company or serious equity in the company. And also protect your funds. So if somebody's so keen on what they've got, get a charge over the business or get a charge over their asset or an asset they've got, so that if it all goes pear-shaped, you can get at least a reasonable portion of your money back. And control the funds too. So if you're one of many investors, that's not so easy to do. But if you're putting a reasonable proportion of the funds in, and they're saying they're going to do this and this, then you control the bank accounts, or at least be one of the signatories of the bank account, so that you at least know what's going on with the money and they're not spending it where they shouldn't. And I've just got caught out on that in Melbourne with a guy who's running a business down there that I'm involved with. Fund on deliverables. So they want $200,000. Well, they need 20 grand to do this, 30 grand to do that. Don't give them the 200 grand. Give it to them in instalments on deliverables, so that you actually know that your money's being spent the right way. And also learn to walk away if you have to. So you might have spent 30 or 40 or 50 grand and you just realise this is not going to happen. You're better off walking away then than think, oh, well, if I spend a bit more and we get to the next road, you know, it might take 6 months to work that out, but yeah, learn to walk away if you have to. Next one. So, you know, everybody makes mistakes. You know, without risk, there's no reward generally. A lot of the stuff is gut feel. So look, I've invested in a number of companies, lost money here, made money there. You get better as you do it. Hopefully in the end you make more money than you put in and you don't go backwards. And after a while it's more gut feel, experience, trusting the people you're working with, learn how to pick people that are difficult to work with and that aren't going to deliver, etc. And also a network of successful people. So if you're coming across a company in a certain sector, as you build your network out, you can talk to friends, people that you've met about that industry. There's a comment made earlier about businesses that you know nothing about, which is also correct. So there's no point in going into real estate if you know nothing about real estate, other than buying your family home and that's it. There's a simple example. And the other key thing is always, you know, how are you going to get your money back? You've always got to ask that at the start, you know, if things go wrong. So some examples. This was one, Bruce, and I'm not expecting you to read all this, but Bruce and I actually worked with this guy when we used to work together. And he had a radiator technology that was made of extremely thin fins. And this technology actually Ferrari used in their Formula One cars for a couple of years, and they started winning races using that technology. So the technology had been proved on the racetrack. The trouble with the whole thing was, and the key thing about the technology was that normally radiators go from copper type connection to a metal connection. You get the transfer efficiency across those different metals can affect, like in a car radiator, it's similar. Whereas he just used aluminium for the whole thing. So his heat transfer ratio was like 30 to 1, much higher than normal. And so he could cool things down extremely fast, which means motors run more efficiently, use less fuel, all sorts of stuff. But he was impossible to work with. So we went through all this process, looked at him, spoke to him, but he was just so hard to work with, and he wanted a ridiculous amount of money for what he had, even though he'd tried 2 or 3 times to raise money, been unsuccessful. So we just walked away in the end. So you've got to, you know, look at your technologies, look at what goes on, and make a decision. But if you can't get along with a person, just get away from it. Another one was a business called Fui. So this was for urinary tract infection. And so what these guys came up with was it's almost like a rice paper. You know when you get the rice paper rolls and you wrap them? It was made of a disposable product, and you put it on the toilet seat. And so when people went to the bathroom, the first flush got washed out. And so the urine that you had for testing was more pure, and so you got less false positives. The product was fantastic. They'd used it a bit in the UK, but when we really looked at the business and realised we'd have to go through the whole Medicare process to get it approved, and that was going to be a nightmare, we walked away in the end and thought this isn't worth investing in or getting involved with, because the government was going to influence it, and why would we put our money and our time in when it was just one item and most people were used to the other? So sometimes the better thing isn't always the thing that's going to work, because the government blockage on that can be more problematic than the product itself. And this, to a certain extent, was what I was actually going to talk about originally with another guy by the name of Bob. So this is something that I'm working on at the moment. So this is industrial hemp, geopolymer industrial hemp. It's stronger than Hebel and those products. This is just you can hand that around and have a look how light it is. Significantly strong. So this is using industrial hemp grown up in the Hunter Valley. We got that from. So this particular opportunity, we're looking at raising a couple of $1 million. We've got on the CRC concrete grant scheme, but at the moment everything's stopped because the university hasn't got any funds to actually work on this project. Another company that I've got involved with is a company called Solar Cloud. So this basically solves the problem on the left in the picture there. You've got residential apartments where you can't put solar panels on the roof of those, but you can put solar panels on the roof of a factory. So what you basically do, you buy a virtual solar panel, and then they put the solar panel on a factory roof. They sign a PPA with the company for 10 to 20 years, and then you get 80% of the revenue. Now this is actually quite profitable. This is about 7% return on investment, a hell of a lot better than the bank at the moment. And they then pay that money into your electricity account, and because the ATO ruled 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when we had the feed-in tariffs, when the electricity companies could offset your electricity costs, there's no tax on it either. So they're just launched. You can buy a panel tomorrow if you want to go on the site. So this is quite an interesting business. The thing's done behind the meter, meaning the factories put the panels on and they use the electricity. They don't export anything to the grid, because when they do the PPA, they're selling their electricity. If the current rate's 30 cents, they're selling it to them for say 25, then you're getting 80% of that. So you're getting a very good earner, and then that 20 cents offsets your electricity bill, which might only be 25 anyway. So you're paying 5 cents a kilowatt for your electricity. So it's a very clever business model. They had to get an AFSL license to launch this as a financial instrument, but that's a very interesting business at the moment. They're looking for some more funding actually right now. Company in Melbourne, we touched on capacitors earlier. So there's a company in Melbourne that's developed these capacitors, ultra capacitors, just store energy a bit like a normal battery. But nowadays they're much, much, much bigger than they were in the old days. In fact, that phone there has that little teeny one up the top there, which were the first ones that came out in the early 80s. So this company produces batteries anywhere from a 2 kilowatt one to containerised batteries. They'll last about 20 years, and significant amount of energy can be stored in them. They can use it for residential and commercial, very safe and clean chemistry. And the interesting thing is Tesla bought Maxwell, which is the one on the right there, just last year, because lithium batteries are quite slow to charge, whereas capacitive batteries can charge almost instantaneously. So when you're doing regenerative braking in a car, the electricity generated initially goes into the capacitor, and then when you accelerate, it comes out. So the lithium stores the base continuous power, and the capacitors, supercapacitors, store the regenerative braking side. So it means you can increase the electric car's distance and coverage capacity significantly, or that's the theory. They've done a lot of experimenting on this in the last couple of years. There's a motorbike company that's got an electric motorbike that uses it. Tesla's been looking at this, and hence why they bought the company, so they can increase the distance of their companies. Anyway, same technology is being used by a small Australian company to develop a battery technology. That's what it looks like. And then if they got it in a container, obviously a lot larger. Another interesting company that I got involved with, Build Bits. So these guys, very recycled ideas. So they took building material left over from building sites, okay. So like if a building job's done and they've got bricks, they might have 100 bricks left from the job. Well, a lot of builders will just say, oh, we'll just chuck it in the skip. Too hard to get rid of. So they created a business, they had a little app, and they had the app buttons very big because most carpenters and builders have got big fingers, so they made the buttons bigger than normal so they could actually push the buttons. And they did quite well at the start, but they had the main trouble with their business in the end. They had an advertising model where the partners paid to advertise on the site. So if you were searching for second-hand windows, for example, then an ad on the site would come up from some of the window manufacturers. So if you couldn't find the window you wanted, you could buy a brand new one from them. That was the sort of logic. But look, the main problem with that business, although it could be relaunched soon, because he rang me the other day, but the owner wasn't a technology guy who started it, and he was getting people saying they could do all this technology with his website. They were overcharging him for all the development costs. He wasn't too educated on that side, so to a certain extent they took advantage of him. The model was too dependent on the advertisers versus making money from the sale of the products on the site. And then you're trying to compete with eBay and Gumtree, which in most cases are free at the start as well. But the concept, they had a lot of product there at one stage. In fact, you would have seen BuildBits, Channel 9 Current Affair was doing those houses where they did those charity builds where they went in and built a house in 10 days. There was that police officer in Penrith who got killed, and they did a house for his family. Well, Brad, who was the builder on the block for a while, he works with Neil in BuildBits, and so they did that house and BuildBits sponsored it, and they got quite a lot of coverage from that, but unfortunately for a number of reasons the business just didn't end up going anywhere. Deco Secure, this is another Australian company. They're actually looking to raise money. Now this is a really interesting business. They use cryptocurrency compression and security algorithms to store data in the cloud. So they use elliptical key encryption is actually what the terminology is. And so I got involved with them really early on. The logic being that everything's in the long term going to move to the cloud. So these guys started in 2014. So now they've just launched a thing called Deco Links, which is the first end-to-end video conferencing technology that's actually encrypted from your screen, effectively. All the other competitors around the world don't do that. So they can be hacked like Zoom and some of the other ones. Very good Australian technology, and still a small startup. So that's their video conferencing technology. So that was just a sort of snapshot of small companies that I've got involved with, just things to think about if you were going to invest in small companies and startups. But as I always say to people, remember, try and keep the IP in Australia. Don't let it go overseas. Thank you.